So welcome to our first special conversation today. In the world that we live in today, where machine learning, machine thinking, and artificial intelligence have exploded all around us, we hope to look back at the role of film processing laboratories, a primarily invisible environment in relation to cinema's hypervisible projection and circulation. Film labs around the world were critical to how films turned out, and tropical countries like India had to invent a variety of strategies to deal with both weather conditions and infrastructure challenges. We believe that our conversation with Ujwal Nirgudkar today will help us reflect on the problems and innovative techniques that emerged in the handling of color processing. Let me start by introducing Ujwal Nirgudkar and Nasreen Munni Kabir, both of whom will be in the conversation along with Kirsty, Dootson, and myself. Ujwal Nirgudkar is a chemical engineer by training with almost 40 years of working in the Bombay film industry. He began his career working at Film Center, a film processing lab in Bombay and Asia's first color lab. He then moved to Film Lab, where he played a major role in setting up the laboratory. Most importantly, he became a global consultant for Akzo Nobel in the Netherlands, where he promoted green technology for film processing around the world. Nirgudkar is currently a technical advisor for the National Film Heritage Mission, launched by the National Film Archive of India, and a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. He has received several awards for technical excellence, contribution to lab processing technology, promoting non-polluting technology, and film restoration. Nasreen Munni Kabir is a television producer, director, and author of several books on Indian cinema. Her television work includes the 46-part series on Bombay cinema titled Movie Mahal, documentaries on Guru Dutt titled In Search of Guru Dutt, and one on Shah Rukh Khan's stardom titled The Inner and Outer World of Shah Rukh Khan. Her books include biographical and detailed conversations with actress Wahida Rehman, singer Lata Mangeshkar, script and dialogue writer Javed Akhtar, filmmaker and lyricist Gulzar, and music director A.R. Rahman. Missing in this is a cinematographer and a lab technician, perhaps. Next. Kabir curates and produces the annual season of Indian films for Channel 4. In the last 2 decades, she has become one of the most sought after in the industry for English subtitling. And the film that we will see tomorrow at the BFI Manthan is also subtitled by her. We will begin with a brief presentation by Mr. Nirgudkar, followed by a conversation amongst 4 of us. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, all of you, for attending this presentation. This is going to be a small technical presentation about how the labs work those days, but I'm trying to make it simple by having more pictures in it than the actual technical jargons. So let me start with how the film started. Everybody is aware of Dada Saheb Phalke, who has started the first film in India in 1913, but very few people are aware about Ambalal Patel, the person who started the color film processing not only in India but in Asia in 1952 by starting a color film processing lab. Of course, you must have heard about this film, Pamposh, which was the first film produced in Geva color by Ambalal Patel. And this is a slide about the British premiere. They had a British premiere also in those days. This was a 1954 film, first film. They did it on Kashmir, mainly to promote the color film stock. So it did have a story, and Irza Mir was the director for it, but it was very popular. Now this is the current state of Film Center building. When this building was made, it was for film processing, and it was indicated by having the perforations on the facade wall. So this is the only, I don't see any building of a lab which has film perforations. And this is my first business card when I started my job at And this you will see at many films produced from early 60s to 2000, color films processed at Film Center, which has become a norm for many of the color films, the hit color films of those era. And when I joined on 11th May 1981 to Film Center, my first job was to make a negative processing machine. The reason those days the customs duty was between 200 to 300%. So we could not import machines in India, and the processing machine has to be made indigenously. So that was my first job. I completed that job in 6 months. By December 81, the machine was ready, and it lasted for 20 years till 2000 when the lab closed down. So, what is a negative processing machine? It has various chemicals used, right from developer, which is the important chemical where the color development takes place, and all these temperatures are controlled. So, this particular machine, when we made those days, was a demand drive machine. You can see these rollers are different than the sprocket rollers. So these sprocket rollers were used earlier so that the film can move. And demand drive used the tension between the film and the roller so that the demand, even if there is a sprocket damage in a film, it won't get damaged in the machine. It can still run in the machine. So that was the benefit of demand drive, and we use demand drive rollers for negative processing machine. Also, when you see the sprocket holes, there is a distinct difference between a negative sprocket hole and a positive sprocket hole. You may not have noticed this, but this particular one is called BH after Bell and Howell, an American company which started making the printing and processing machines. And this was used for case, it's Kodak specification used for print film. And why there is a difference? Because if you see these edges are rounded, so it can do many runs in a projector without much friction. So this is the basic difference. So even if you see a small piece of film, just from the perforation you can find out what kind of film it is. And then there were various companies which were making film stocks. Kodak was the prominent, and 80% of the world used Kodak stocks. Then in Japan, Fujifilm started in around 1969, and that same time, 1969, the agency was given to Patel India, a sister company of Film Center. So we were also handling Fujifilm distribution all over India. Then there was Agfa Gewert company from Belgium and Orwo from East Germany. So all these companies, when they made their negatives, the processes were not the same. Fujifilm were smart enough, they followed the Kodak process. So in the same machine where you can process Kodak film, you can process Fujifilm also. And Agfa Gewert and Orwo had slightly different processes. So you have to have a separate machine in the lab to process these films. Particularly, Orwo came from East Germany, from a very cold country. So these machines require different temperatures also. Even when Kodak introduced their process, their first process was cold process, ECN. And then that was changed to ECN2, which was a hot process. And the machine which I made in 1981 was the first hot process machine in India to process those films. Also, for prints, there were various film stocks used from Kodak, Fujifilm, Agfa Gewert, and Orwo. As I told you, the film stocks were imported in India and they were very costly, like also a duty of 200 to 300%. So there was a restriction on how many cans you can use. Like typically, a film could use 100 cans of a particular brand. So 100 cans of 4.5 minutes can give you 450 minutes of shooting. For a film which is finally edited to a version of 120 to 130 minutes, this ratio was comparatively less as compared to Hollywood. But most of the cameramans, they manage within that ratio. Also, when we made prints, it was not necessary that I am getting full Kodak stock to make the, if my negative is Kodak, I was not getting all Kodak stock to make all the prints. So there was a combination of making prints of Kodak from Kodak negative using stocks from Kodak, Fujifilm, Agfa Gevert and Orvo. So this has also affected. When you say the color corrections were not done properly for certain prints, this might be one of the reason that the exact matching film was not available for making the print. And there can be even commercial reasons also, because Kodak was the costliest stock and the other stocks were comparatively cheaper. Also, when you talk about film stocks, these are the cans of negative from Fujifilm. There are numbers written on it. Now this is 64D. D means daylight balance. These negatives were used to shoot in a daylight atmosphere, outdoor atmosphere. And then we had 64D, 250D, then 250. There is no number mentioned. In Kodak, they used to mention letter T after that. So this 250 is tungsten balance. So when you are shooting like inside this room, this is with artificial light, you use tungsten film. And the highest film available was 500T. So for low light condition, they used to use 500T. And for bright light, daylight, they used to make 64D. So a cameraman has to select which particular stock should be used and how those particular scenes to be done. So this was also dependent on which stocks are available. Sometimes he has to shoot in a low light condition, but high speed film is not available. So they have to use, instead of 500, 250, and we used to do push processing in the lab. So there were so many combinations done in the lab. Also, if you see the typical size of the can, all the round cans are for 35 mm, all the square cans are for 16 mm. And this was followed even by all film companies. So Kodak also, the round cans are for 35 mm and square cans are for 16 mm. The major difference between Hollywood and India was they use 1000 feet cans, whereas and it lasted for 11 minutes and 11.1 minute. And in India, we use 400 feet cans. That is the main reason was in India, films were dubbed. In Hollywood, actors, they were not able to dub the films, and that technology was not very much used there. That is why they wanted 11 minute scene to be recorded without changing a camera roll. So those rolls were continuously, and they did it with sync sound. So the original sound was recorded from the actor. Whereas in India, most of the films were dubbed. After the shooting was done, the reels were shown, the rush prints, and then at the dubbing studio, and the same actor used to come and dub his dialogues again. So this was used particularly in India. As I told you earlier, this was a hot process, Kodak ECN2 and ECP2. P is for positive, N is for negative. And they came out with 2A, 2B, 2C like versions, various versions. And why it was called hot process? Because it used a temperature which was more than earlier process. Earlier processes, because most of the film shooting and processing was done in USA or the European countries, which had a lower temperature as compared to Asia. These processes were more standardized. But when they started marketing their films to Asia and other countries, they thought that the process also needs some change, and the hot process was made. Also in hot process, the advantage was that timing of the developing was also reduced. So the film could be processed in much faster, with less developing time. And along with these processes, there were various chemical issues. And in early days, even chemicals we had to import, like the key chemical color developer was imported. Then in India, we started manufacturing these chemicals also. There was a standardization by government, which is called ISI, Indian Standards Institute. So there was a committee, photographic chemical standardization. I also work on that committee for the government of India. So we, even before, much before the digital came into existence, we also were standardizing the photographic chemicals. Unless the photographic chemicals are standardized, your process cannot be standardized, film processing. Also, when you think about the color grading or color correction, the role of color grader was much more important earlier because we use subtractive color correction system that use yellow, magenta, and cyan filters. What it means is that there was a scene of say 200 feet, 300 feet like that. From each scene, two frames were selected, and they used to make a band of all these two frames from all the scenes. And there was this yellow, magenta, and cyan filters were available in the range from 5 to 125. So you select a yellow filter of 5, magenta of that. Like that, they used to make a combination of filter for a particular scene, and they used to print it and check it on the table how the colors look like. And after that, if there is a change, they have to change the yellow filter from 5 to 10 or to 25, like that magenta. So this was all manual work, and it was very tedious. And the color grader has to depend on his eyesight to check and compare color. There was no machine available those days. So those people who have done the earlier color grading, they are really expert, and they have done that job. You can imagine if they have to select two frames from each scene and correct it. That process was called Lily because in any color film, to get the perfect black and perfect white is difficult. So the system was called follow the white or Lily. So Lily was a white floor, so the system was dubbed as Lily, color correction. And we still have some of those old bands available at the National Film Archive, but they are very rare. But this is how the correction was done. Then the corrections changed to additive using red, green, and blue light walls. So light walls were electronically operated. I'm going to explain you how this system worked. So this was much easier as compared to the earlier grading system. So say from 60 to 75 maybe or 78, this subtractive color correction was used. When I joined Film Center in 1981, both the systems were existing. So they were using subtractive as well as the additive had newly introduced. They started using that. Also, when in India, we got a popular format of CinemaScope. What is CinemaScope? We are using a 35 width film, and when you are shooting something on a camera, there is a lens which compresses the scene, just like a spring is compressed. And the entire processing is done on 35 and in the projector, finally, when you're viewing, there is another lens which expands the image. So using a 35 stock, I could get an effect of almost similar to 70 So this was also a cost saving process to get a better look and bigger look, and this was used by India. So CinemaScope, although started in Hollywood, it was more popular in India as compared to Hollywood. Hollywood used this widescreen 1.85:1. So most of the Hollywood films, when you get, this is the format they use. And you must have heard about this film, Kagaj Ke Phool, shot by V.K. Murthy sir. He was the first person to use CinemaScope in India. And I had a chance to do a workshop with him, film workshop, Fujifilm workshop with him in Bangalore. So this was a photo taken at the Bangalore workshop with him. And he was very knowledgeable on how to use, he was Gurudat's pet cameraman. So all the Gurudutt films mostly were shot by him. And he also got a Dada Saheb Phalke Award for the highest technical award. He is the only technician from India to get Dada Saheb Phalke Award. Otherwise, most of the awards have gone to actors. Also, apart from this, there was a technology which was called 3-perf. So instead of 4 perforation, you use only 3 perforation to record the image. So there is a 25% saving in the raw stock. So you save negative. And the only thing is this was used only for negative, and there was in the lab a a duplicate negative was made with 4 perforation. By expanding the image, 4 perforation negative was made, and prints were made with 4 perforation, because 3-perf projectors are not available. But to save the stock and save the cost of filmmaking, this technology was used. Also, they have used in Hollywood, they have used 2-perf technology, because when they were doing Titanic shooting, they had to do a lot of shooting in the underwater. And once you put a magazine, film magazine, to load the magazine again, you have to come up outside the water. To reduce that time, they used this 2-perf technique, so the time was doubled. So 11 instead of 11 minutes, you can shoot for 22 minutes for 1,000 feet roll. So this was a technique which was specially used for Titanic. As I told you again, these are the negative, and so these are the exact dimensions. And we at the archive, when we check the dimensions, if these dimensions have changed, we know what is the shrinkage to the film. And there is a limit to which a film can run on a sprocket. If the shrinkage is more, we cannot run it on a sprocket. So this was used to check whether the film is in good condition or not. Also, we use another technology in India, particularly Super 16 mm. Super doesn't have anything meaning. That means the perforation was only on one side of the 16 mm. 16 mm being a thin film, it could be supported from one side. And the advantage was that by removing the perforation on this side and extending the image size, the quality was better. The image size was increased and the quality was better. And this particular Super 16 was used by many regional films in India. So most of the regional films, to save again the cost, I mean, also the amount of film. When you use 35 mm and you compare it with 16 mm, you use 2.5 times less film, because the image size is also small, and that saving was used by most of the regional filmmakers. Although the quality was good, and then you can also, there were machines to expand these films again back to 35 mm to record a print from 16 mm to 35 mm, blow up prints we used to call them. So these kind of prints were also made. How this processing used to take? These were the total processes in the lab. So negative processing, then telecine, editing, I will explain you, editing, then negative cutting, picture negative is ready, then sound recording and mixing is done in a sound studio, sound negative is ready, then color correction was done on an analyzer, and then both picture negative and sound negative is used to make a print. And then after the print was made, even the print has to be made, processed in a chemical, and then it was ready for exhibition. So telecine was done to check if the shooting has been done properly or not. Even before telecine, we used to make rush prints. When telecine machines were not available in the early 60s or 70s, they used to print every negative piece after processing and make a print without a color grading, just to see that the quality of image, the focus and other things are okay or not. And that report lab has to give within 24 hours to the cinematographer or the production team, so that they can demolish the sets and the actors can be relieved. Otherwise, if something goes wrong in the lab, they have to shoot again. That is why they were waiting for instructions. So wherever the film gets processed in India, whether it is Kashmir or Chennai or wherever, the lab has to give a report within 24 hours. Normally, that was the thing. I'm going to explain these processes in detail. So negative processing and positive processing were wet processes which use chemical, and color correction and printing was dry processes did not use the chemicals. Since you can't visit a lab now because most of the labs are closed, I got a pictures of the lab to explain you how those things work. This was a negative processing machine. This machine is photographed without a film on it. This is called a leader. So when we attach original film in the darkroom, it will start coming out. And normally this was run at a speed of 3000 feet per minute. This is again another view where there are chemicals inside. The film used to pass like this in loops and finally come in a drying chamber. And these were the various temperature, various chemicals were used and these temperatures were controlled using this temperature control. If something, normally the speed remains fixed because it's a mechanical arrangement. But if something goes wrong in the temperature, even a 0.1 degree centigrade temperature in developer can make change in the quality of image. So the higher the temperature, more development takes place, the image becomes dark. The lower temperature, it becomes brighter. So this was also very critical. Then before putting on a printing machine, these negatives were cleaned in an ultrasonic film cleaning machine. So this machine had an ultrasonic generator. We used to loosen the dust, and after loosening the dust, there was a chemical called perchloroethylene inside this. So it was cleaned. And this is the close-up of the ultrasonic cleaning machine. These soft rollers used to clean the negative. So that negative is dust and dirt free before printing. Then as I told you how we were checking the processing. These are the strips provided by Kodak or Fujifilm. This has 21 steps. So every 2 hours, the strips were processed in the lab. There are different strips of print film and different strips of negative. And we used to check it on with a software, whether it is matching with the targeted reading or not. Then on the basis of that, we used to have a quality control of the film processing. So this was an offline sensitometry. I have designed online sensitometry for which I received 2 US patents, and that I will talk afterward. This was also a negative checking table. So we had HEPA filters and entire air was filtered. So whenever we are checking negative is so critical that even a small part of dust or something puts on it, you will see it in a blown up form on the screen afterward. So we have to take utmost care. Even when we are doing the restoration from old film, so before digitalization, this ultrasonic cleaning and all these processes even take place even now, before we put the film on a scanner. And this is the most important thing which I want to explain, the color grading. Now, this was a color analyzer. Here we used to put a negative and we used to get a positive image on a monitor. This was a calibrated monitor. I think Sony used to make those monitors. And this is again a Kodak test, LAD test, laboratory M density test. So Kodak has given a standard. And when we put a particular negative, we can control these 3 knobs, red, green, and blue, to change the color grading. So if you put a negative and you have seen the image over there, I want to increase green or decrease green, I can use this knob. I want to increase red or decrease red, I can use this knob. I can increase red, blue or decrease blue using this knob. If I want to change all the colors simultaneously, I used to use this white knob, which changes all the color. And what was the reading? After these knobs were changed in such a way that there were readings from these knobs 0 to 50. So I will have a grading for a particular 200 feet of scene, red 22, green 28, blue 30. Like that I used to get. So all these readings were noted down in the lab for a particular scene. Like that, every scene was graded. And when we are doing this grading, the cameraman and sometimes the director also used to sit here to give a guideline how this film should be graded, what they have in mind when they were shooting. And so again, this is a close-up of the same control panel. And when we were printing this from this negative using the grading, there were two ways. Either we used to have a floppy to put those grading data, or there was a printer net connection. The networking was done in the lab to take a connection from grader to this printer. And this was those days. It was a computerized printer net, which was the new system in '85 also. And this is the main function. So depending on the red and green, blue and corrections, if you see these are the two rollers. If it is 0 correction, both the things are closed. If it is 50, it is fully open. So based on this open or closed position, all the light readings were controlled, red, green and blue. And they were coinciding and passing through negative on a print to make a corrected color print. So this is very critical. Also, it has to be the same calibration for all printing machine and all processing machine, because when we are producing mass production in a lab, like there is a demand for 400 prints in 1 week, so it has to be printed on different machines, processed on different machine, but still we have to control the quality of the to the same quality. So it was very important that the QC system was followed properly in the lab. Then also sound. Sound was in the form of image. And this is a special chemical. There is no film here. A chemical applied at the edge on the left hand side where the sound used to be there. So there was earlier a black and white image. Then it changed to high magenta sound. And then it changed to cyan sound. So even in sound, there was changes in color. But of course, you can't see it because it's heard. So, and then we used to check the prints. Every print, if we have to check it in a theater, it will take real time. Like 2-hour print needs 2 hours. So this was a fast checking machine to check. And then there was a Dolby system to check the Dolby quality. Whenever we used to have Dolby digital sound on a print, we used to check all the parameters during projection, and we used to get an index called DQI, Dolby Quality Index. And anything, so the numbers was from 0 to 100. Anything below 75 was not accepted for Dolby quality. So we have to check that at the end of the reel what reading we get. And if it is less than that, we have to reject it as a Dolby, but it can be used for other sound. Again, this is since CinemaScope, your image looks compressed. This is a telecine machine and control panel. I will just quickly go through the various soundtracks used. So this was a mono soundtrack in early days. Then much before the Dolby came into existence in 1984, there was a magnetic track sound. This was used for Sholay. So what they used to do, they used to make a print, regular print without a sound. And then we used to coat this magnetic oxide, just like the audio cassette tape. Same compound was coated in a separate machine, and sound was recorded again on this. So there is 2 tracks here, 1 track, 1 track, and 2 tracks. So left 3 tracks and right 3 tracks were used. And this was first time used for Sholay in 1975. And those who have seen those films that day, they really found a difference when that coin falls, or there are so many sound effects in Sholay which you can observe. I was lucky enough that when we completed 100 years of Indian cinema, I was a keynote speaker with Amitabh Bachchan, and in front of him I explained this technology to him as well. Then this is Dolby SR, spectral recording, Dolby left and right stereo. Dolby Digital was between the perforation in the form of binary system, like black and white dots. This is 1 and 0. So this was the digital. If the digital is not available in the theater, or if digital fails, it was automatically going to the Dolby SR. So the print was still running in the theater, but you can make a difference from Dolby Digital to Dolby SR. SR is spectral recording. Similar technology was also developed by Sony, HDDS. Only thing, they recorded sound on both the edges. So here, the same soundtrack was recorded on both sides. If one sound fails, it was picking up the other sound. That is how the system was. And Hollywood movies used to have all these soundtracks. In India, this track was not used. The most popular track in India was this DTS, Digital Theatre Sound. Here, the entire sound was recorded on a CD, audio CD, and you see this dotted line. This was an indicator to pick up a sound for this frame from this. So it was locking the sound for a particular frame. And here the advantage was that you can have the same print and have different audio CD. So a same print, like Hindi print, can be shown in Tamil, Telugu, with using different audio CD. So the cost was saved. And that is why this was very popular in South. DTS was very popular in South. Say they watch the films. And it was saving the cost also. Also, DTS developed another technology which was not used in India to project the subtitles. So in the same system, subtitles were also incorporated, and they had a special projector next to the film projector where the subtitles were also projected. I made, when we were shifting the labs, I mean, I was with Film Center till 2000, then the same group started Film Lab at Goregaon. And when we were shifting, and it was in a city, so we were not allowed to use polluting chemicals. Otherwise, we would not have got a permission. So I was thinking on that, and one of the steps in the film processing, bleaching, was using a polluting chemical, potassium ferricyanide. I replaced that with 1,3-PDTA, propylene diamine tetraacetic acid. It's too technical a jargon. This chemical was manufactured by AkzoNobel, a Dutch MNC, but they were not aware that this can be used in film processing. So I started the use in 2004, and I was lucky to meet their CEO when he visited India. But that was 2 years I was communicating with them, nothing much happened. But in 2006, their CEO visited India, and I was invited for a dinner with him at Taj, Mumbai. I was given 10 minutes to talk to him. I could convince him, and then 23rd December 2006, this meeting happened. After that, he went back to Amsterdam. On 2nd January 2007, I received a letter that I have been appointed global consultant to promote this technology. The CEO was Hans Weizers. He was a ex-finance minister of Dutch government and PhD in economics. Now he is a deputy chairman of Shell Corporation in US. He's a very big personality. And then that company covered that story in the international magazine. And initially it was used in Bollywood, and then I changed it to Hollywood. A technology which started in India in 2004 was used in Hollywood by 2008. And I continued to be their consultant from 2007 to 14. And I changed all the labs in the world to this technology. In fact, when I went to Hollywood, Deluxe and Technicolor questioned me that although you have done the test in India, let Kodak also endorse it. So we approached Kodak. I did the same research in Kodak Rochester lab. And after 2-3 months, Kodak not only endorsed this technology, but changed their manual to include my technology. And that technology was used all over the world. So that's how I got connections around the world with most of the labs. And then I was also appointed on the board of director of the Association of Cinema and Video Laboratories International. So interacted with Deluxe, Technicolor, Photochem, all the labs in Europe, and many companies, Kodak, Fujifilm, like that. Now we have changed to digital. So what is the basic difference? I mean, film was taken as a gold standard for imaging. So why digital images are different than film? This is the film structure. So negative structure, this is a cross-sectional view, and we have three different layers: blue sensitive layer, green sensitive layer, and red sensitive layer. And there are various filter layers so that this color does not go to the other layer. It's a complicated technology. I don't want to go into more details, but this is the thing why the prints fade and only one particular color is shown after so many years. The thing is, these color, layers fade differently after aging. So not that every layer fades in the same way. So that is why you see high magenta film prints, because that color life is more than the other colors. And that is one of the reason when you see prints after so many years, they look different than the original color correction. So the correction was done, but the life of this thing is limited. And to overcome that life, Hollywood has done what they did is they did separation of color negative into three black and white negatives. And black and white negative on a polyester base has a life of 500 years. Color negative on a polyester base has a life of 150 years. The best digital technology available today is LTO, which has a life of 30 years. So film is still a golden standard. And this is the basic difference between film and digital. This S-shaped curve, yellow curve, is for film, and this pink curve, straight line, is for digital, because digital is binary, 1 and 0, and on the x-axis we have density in the exposure, and on the y-axis we have densities. So this is the minimum density, maximum density. This was called the range of the film, or the total stops a film can use. If you see these curves, there is a difference in the underexposure region. This yellow curve is slightly curved, and digital is straight line. Also here, in the overexposure, film has a curve and digital is straight line. What this means, that in the underexposure region, like blacks, when we are covering with a film media, you can see the separation in your hair, black hair on the film. Whereas in digital, it will look like a black mass. It won't give a separation. Same thing in the overexposure region. If I'm taking a shot from this room outside the window, on film, I will get more details of the outside image, and on digital, I will get a blurry image. I won't get that. So these are the basic differences. Now, digital wants to imitate the film using a similar technology. To make that, they will have to make several straight lines to match this. And that will be 10 times more costlier than the film. As I told you, this was one of the big organization, Association of Cinema and Video Laboratories. In 2009, I was appointed the director. Robert Olson, who was the president of ACVL, he was also a senior vice president of Technicolor those days. And for my contribution, technical contribution globally, I was the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences invited me as a member in June 2017. This is for the exceptional accomplishments you have done for the. And I was invited with my wife for the reception in 2017. Officially invited. My wife was also officially invited. He's the president of the academy, John Bailey, those days. And now since 2020, I am also on the Science and Technology Council of the academy. This is the pin I'm wearing, what you were saying. This council has 25 members in the world, and I'm the only Indian. I'm representing India. We have other members are like senior vice presidents and CTOs of Warner, Paramount, Sony Picture. The global head of Google Cloud is on our committee. Head of Library of Congress, US government is on our committee. And we are discussing about the next 10 years, which technology should be used in media and entertainment industry. one of the key projects we are working on currently is ADPF, Academy Digital Preservation Forum, how to preserve the digital data for long term. It is an interesting project. We have a website. I mean, anybody can go to the website and see what work is being done. Also, we have done one more project, ACES, Academy Color Encoding System, to do a color calibration right from shooting till the end for digital technology. So all these projects are being conducted. Academy's complete name is Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. People don't know, they know about the Oscar Award, but they are not aware about what the Sciences division is doing. So there is a lot of work being done. But also they invited me to the Academy Award on the red carpet in 2019. So I was the first technician to be invited over there. And I enjoyed the evening with the stars. So thank you very much, University College of London and all the people, Kirsty, Ranjani and Purvi from University from London. Also, I thank Nasreen, Munni, Kabir, who has come specially for this session. This is the short story. We can have a long story when you have more time. Thank you.
I guess we can start with Munni.
Yes.
We can start.
As you can tell, it's a very vast story and it's a huge story, but I'm rather interested in kind of the detail and specifics. Now, when you had the negative and you were going to make the prints, did the producers, could they afford rush prints in color, or did they ask for black and white rush prints?
In fact, rush prints in color were made because they also need a reference for color. So, I mean, if the negative is Kodak and the rush print is made on Geva, also possible. But that was just to have an idea how the image has come. Basically, they wanted to be sure as far as the focus part is concerned and the frame part is concerned. Everything is covered in the frame. Because in olden days, there was no camera assist, digital camera assist. So the only way you can see an image is after processing in the lab.
So it had to be in color.
Yeah.
And what about, were you all doing black and white and color at the same time? Did you have different machines, or were the chemicals different?
The machines were different, the chemicals were also different. In fact, if you see, the black and white films are more costlier because it contains more silver.
I see. And then what about, in terms of the nitrate negatives, were you developing
I will not
them?
talk about the stock in this presentation, but earlier we have used, the stock started with nitrate, cellulose nitrate was the first stock, then cellulose acetate, and afterwards polyester. So polyester started in 1996, acetate started in around 55 or 60, and much before that was nitrate. So all the nitrate films, particularly in the National Film Archives, are already converted into acetate stock, so that even if something goes wrong, touch wood, but
The fire hazard.
the films are safe. In fact, we have footage from Second World War also, which is the recent collection. And the oldest film we have at the archive is 1899 short film on bank of Ganges in Kolkata, shot by a British cinematographer.
Do we know his name?
I don't have the data, but I've seen the film.
Yes.
I've seen the film.
I see. Okay, then.
Thank you so much, Ujwal. That was so fascinating. I wanted to pick up on something you mentioned about the printing of soundtracks, which was so interesting to me. I know there's lots of people who are interested in non-silver soundtracks. Could you speak a little bit more about the use of colour to print sound and how issues of colour fade might impact that? That we've talked a lot about the aesthetic ramifications of colour fade, but presumably that would also impact the sound quality as well.
Yes. Actually, in most of the earlier days, we used a mono soundtrack, which was black and white, so which were not fading as such. So it lasted long. But in wherever we have used high magenta sound or cyan dye track, which was a later stage, again in India this was not used much. Most of the Hollywood prints use all these things, and if you change these tracks, we have to change a sensor at the projection level also, which was not available in India. So in India, fortunately, our tracks are in good condition. And when you are doing a Dolby, your another information is available on Dolby MOD, which is another separate disc. So if that can be traced from Dolby company. So even if your sound on the picture has faded or not good quality, you can get a Dolby MOD and use that soundtrack.
Isaac, so the black and white sound continued much longer. So that's a silver soundtrack.
Yeah.
So and presumably it's also a little bit more costly than doing a magenta or cyan soundtrack. Is that?
No, the image was black and white, but the film was color. So we have to get the most contrasty image on the sound part.
For the sound, right?
That is why a separate chemical was applied only on the sound side to make that image more developed separately. So it was called sound developer, separate chemical.
And that's also interesting then, that question of contrast range that you raise is also a sonic quality as well as an optical quality.
Yes.
That's really interesting. I'm going to hand over to Ranjani.
Okay, so there's one question I wanted to ask about, the printing process. You've talked, once the negative was ready, one of the things that you have told me is that Hollywood always used copies of negatives to make the prints. But we did not have enough money, so we were using the original negative to make all the prints.
Yes.
So that's one question. The other question is that the prints were also made on different stocks. And that was linked to some hierarchy of exhibition, that the metro cities would get the best print, Kodak, and that they would go international, and the small towns would get the lower level prints. Can you explain this a little, because the audience needs to know that we didn't all see the same color film. We saw different stocks, people in different territories.
I will talk about the first point, the original negative. Because the negative stock was costly and limited, we could not afford to make a duplicate negative. So original negatives were used to make the prints. And that is why the major problem for the archive is the negatives are damaged because of the run. So many times they were run on the machine. And in Hollywood, what they used to do, they used to make dupe negatives. So the original negative is used maximum 3 to 4 times. They used to make a master positive from that, and from master positive you can make several dupe negatives. So those dupe negatives were used. The advantage of dupe negative was not only it saved the original negative, but all these color corrections were incorporated. So with one single color correction we can print from dupe. So the production was faster. In India also we have used dupes for certain films, not for all films. Those who could afford, they made it, and that's the reason many of the negatives are in damaged condition.
And the printing difference in stock?
Yeah, stock, again, what happens now, as I told you, the order for prints is a dynamic thing. You don't know when the release is announced, say 10 days in advance. Normally they don't plan it much in advance. So the stock should be available to make. If I have got order for 500 print and we have stock for 400 print, then we have to definitely make a print on another stock to be delivered on time. And then that's a kind of compromise, because a Kodak stock will perfectly match with Kodak print film, or a Fujifilm stock will perfectly match with Fujifilm. But a combination of that may not perfectly match, and you cannot do a proper grading for different stock from one negative.
So the best quality prints were seen in the big cities.
It's a commercial decision. It was not a technical decision.
No,
so
that is
I was
important,
taking the technical
because
decisions.
we were all seeing films in different parts of the world.
I was
clearly
responsible
seeing
for
different
technical
things.
decisions, not for commercial decisions.
Yeah.
But when you were talking about the dupe neg, I know that I was also told by some producers they would not invest in making that dupe neg until the film was released and it ran well. Like Pakiza, there was many prints made at Ramnod, not at your lab. And then once it became a hit, Then they made a dupe neg. So therefore, between the original neg and the dupe neg, damage had taken place.
Yeah.
So the dupe neg was, well, it was whatever you could get. And talking about Pakiza, one last point, I got that information. It was shot in 1956, one scene, the song in Hi Logone, the marketplace where Meena Kumari is dancing. It was shot in black and white in 1956, and then Kamal Saab shot it in color, and then finally in CinemaScope. And I was ticked off by his son just now, who said, "Don't you know it's all over YouTube?"
I wonder if before we open it out to the audience, can I just ask a very general question? We're all interested in the kind of the lab as a space of kind of labour and work, and where, you know, film gets made creatively and technically. Could you just describe the kind of the smells, the temperatures? What does it feel like working in film centre, which we've all kind of visited in one iteration or another?
When we are dealing with negatives, you will get a peculiar smell of the cellulose acetate, because acetic acid smell sometimes comes. The smell comes more when it is not stored properly in an air condition. So most of the archives, if it is not stored properly, the cellulose acetate reacts with the oxygen and water in the air to form acetic acid. And that acetic acid smell you get in most of the old negatives. So that's bad. And so we have to have proper storage condition. And the storage conditions are different for color stock and black and white stock. So you have to follow the relative humidity and temperature.
And in terms of the temperature of the lab, presumably it varies enormously between the spaces?
Was it air conditioned, no?
If it is air conditioned, it won't vary. But then in actually what happened when the lab closed down in year around 2010 onwards, digital was there all the time. The labs used to store the negatives earlier because they were getting orders for next prints. So it was if you are to store it for a longer time, somebody has to pay for it, either the lab or the producer. And then the producer shifted their negative to some non-proper storage systems, where they used the cold storage systems in Mumbai also, which was not suitable for film negative. So storage of negative is one of the important thing, as well as print, but negative is very important. So that was not taken care earlier. And particularly when the lab closed down, it was a bigger problem. Till the labs existed, everything was done properly by all the labs.
I had two little questions. One is the training of your technicians. Where were they trained and how are they trained? And second part is, I'm very naive, but Ujwalji, I don't know, was film stock ever produced in India?
First thing, training.
Yeah.
There was no formal training available even now. So I did one course from Kodak. It was a 15 days course, but after 3-4 years working in the lab, I did that course. It was useful, definitely. And those days it was even communication things were not, no internet, nothing was there. So we could not gather much information about training and all. Now with YouTube, you can do much training than even personal training. But now the young generation is very much aware of what, particularly we are training the people for archives, and we are also employing people who are already trained in labs in Bologna or some other places. So definitely for this particular project, there are trained people available, and around the world there is a big demand for trained people in this sector.
For restoration?
For even preservation, restoration, all those things.
Right.
Because as far as my information goes, out of the total filmic content available in the world, only 10% has been digitized. So 90% is still to be done. So that has to be preserved till it is digitized. Of course, we also tell you to preserve the films even after digitization, because this you are doing with the current available technology. If you get still superior technology to digitize afterwards, your films should be there, available.
I see. And what about the film stock in India? Was it ever produced?
No. The reason is, I think, those days the legal system, the copyright laws and other things were not. So Kodak was not keen on setting up a production factory. That was, I think, one of the main reasons, not the technical reason, because if somebody copies that thing, and then they will lose their business.
So it was the patent, question of the patent.
Yeah.
So Ujwalji, can you tell us, the audience, something about the difference between when colorization was done for Mughal-e-Azam and Naya Daur? What was the difference between the two?
See, first of all, as a archivist, I don't recommend colorization. You have to preserve it in original format. But the younger generation wants a better look, and then it can be done. So if you're doing for a film like Naya Daur, which was only black and white, normally when the colorization software, what they do is that if I have taken a picture, a black and white picture, the red will give me different gray tone, the black will give different, blue will give different, yellow will give different. So although there are gray tones, they are different for different colors. So this new software actually can track it, which color it was originally. So those softwares are being used. For Mughal-e-Azam, there was an advantage because one of the songs was picturized in color. So we had a color reference already existed in a picture that can be used for other reels also. But otherwise now this is software based and maybe very soon AI based because AI can identify all these colors much accurately and then the restoration process will be much faster.
Or worse?
Shall we open out and I'll run around?
Last question. I don't think
yeah.
these colorization, Mughal-e-Azam did well on re-release, but Hum Dono failed, Naya Daur failed. So the Indian audiences or people of watching Indian cinema were not keen on those colorizations.
Because they have the memory with black and white. I mean, when you also have some very old photograph and when you see it in black and white, you get a different feeling rather than watching it in color.
True.
So, question.
There's a back one. Hi, thank you so much. That was fascinating. I have two questions. My first question was about the Axo Nobel dissolving process. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about how you came up with the idea, like your working process. I know you said you didn't want to get too technical, but I'm really curious about how you thought that up. And my second question was kind of what you would sort of advise to people who are working in like the more brittle technologies of digital, because they are kind of more brittle. As in, I don't know, as a filmmaker, when I record on just a solid state drive, I know that if anything happens to the solid state drive, then my footage is gone. You don't have quite the same volatility with film. What would you advise to the next generation, like, in terms of how we preserve our work moving forward? Because that is the work you're also doing.
So I will first answer that exonable question is when we shifted to suburb in Mumbai city, the lab was to be set up and we had stricter pollution control rules. So the chemicals which we could use earlier at our city lab, which was an old lab, and that time those rules were not that strict. So if we were to set up a new lab, we have to be very strict in pollution control. Without that, we could not have set up the lab. And the reason that was my urge to start innovating on what new things can be done. So I started using different chemicals, and luckily for me, the old lab was existence and the new lab was getting made. So I had time to do the experiments at the new lab. And we tried various chemicals and I came out with this particular chemical. Being a chemical engineer, I'm aware of what are the formulas which can be used. So I found that this particular formula would be more suitable for this and started working on it. In fact, once this ExxonMobil found that this formula is suitable, they even branded it differently. It was in a general brand earlier, Dissolve in Chelates. Then it was branded as Dissolve in MP, motion picture. And I talked about it at a conference called Hollywood Goes Green in Hollywood, at the same place where at Roosevelt Hotel, where the first Oscar Awards were held. So I had a privileged to do a conference at the same location, and there were so many people from Hollywood present, the production people, and they accepted the idea. We jointly did a party, Kodak and ExxonMobil, to all the lab owners in the world. We hired a ship at Irvine, and it was a big event to meet all the lab owners with their families from the world. And so everybody was convinced, and two big multinationals supported me, Kodak and ExxonMobil. So they're $1 billion, or more than 20, $30 billion turnover people. So it was very well planned. We had a marketing support from the MBAs from ExxonMobil, who were trained at Harvard, and all that support was available. They had two offices already, one in New York and Chicago, and everything over there was structured by them. All over the world, they had offices. I was supporting the technical part, explaining it to the technical team in the lab and getting it executed, the experiments. And it was a win-win situation for me. I mean, actually, I should have left Film Lab to join ExxonMobil, but Film Lab also told me that since you have been working with us for so many years, they elevated me to the board position as a technical director and told me that you are no more an employee, so you can travel anywhere you want to do. And in return of that, I gave the chemical agency for India to the same company, Film Lab. So whatever chemicals sold in India to Prasad and to AdLab was, they made money. And about the second question is
Second question was about. Sorry, the second question was really about the volatility of digital technology, which you touched upon in your talk, and you talked about film being a gold standard still, but it's not accessible really to most.
digital. You asked me about digital.
No, she is asking
how
that.
can we make it? How can
So
we make it
I would suggest anybody who want to have more information, there are two white papers published by the Academy called Digital Dilemma 1 and 2. They are available on the oscars.org website. It gives a lot of information when we change from film to digital. And this is a paper made by about 100 top technicians from the industry, and it's available on the Academy website. I took a special permission and made translations of these papers into Hindi and Marathi for local people in India, and that was released by the Academy president when he visited India. I think everybody should read that paper.
Yes, actually I have an observation about colorization. The main reason not to colorize black and white materials is because of the act of filming. The cinematographer was not thinking about shooting in color. So the set design, the lighting and everything is not geared towards color design at all. It's geared towards how it's going to look in black and white cinematography. And I think one of the more distressing things is that black and white is no longer considered to be or appreciated as an art form by a generation that's not familiar with it. All the walls are painted in terms of how they will come out in grey tone. All the furniture is chosen in terms of how all the clothing, everything's seen through a blue filter to know how it's going to come out in black and white. And it would seriously distort our appreciation of the cinematographer's artistry if we were to start viewing the films in colour, which were tended to be in black and white. I mean, they're a marginalised profession enough without a serious distortion of what they were trying to do. So that's.
There is a big, I would like to comment on this. There is a big difference shooting on black and white and on color film, because when you are using a color film, you have to also find out the color temperature of the light, which is a different requirement. Also, the earlier color films, they were shot into bright light. The light required was much higher than the black and white film also. So it was literally a tough time for all those actors when in the beginning, when they shot on color, they had to bear a lot of heat because of the lights. And those days, the studios were also not air conditioned. So it was really a tough time for those 70s when they shot for color. That is why the company started making high-speed films so that it can be shot in lesser light.
Can you hear me? Thank you so much. So many questions, but I want to ask very specific ones. Something that Nasreen picked up. On the question of rushes, when you share the rushes with somebody, I'm asking an aesthetic question. So what is a bad? When does a producer ask you to process something? Again, director or producer, or cinematographer, like who does it? Not producer. The cinematographer, the director, that's one. The other is, because it's a question of accidents, that's what I'm asking, like something doesn't come out well, so what exactly are you redoing it? And the second, and the three questions, second is, I want to know, according to the lab folks, you who had a long career, what would you consider to be a good-looking film? or secretly you must be saying that's a not a good film. I know this from DI folks who say, cinematographer is really bad, doesn't even know how to shoot in color. I've heard all this. So I'm curious about what you thought, like who was in your reckoning, because what we think of somebody as big cinematographer is really not there. The lab has some sense of that, so I want to know that. The other is, when you got these awards, I mean, you should have had a patent in your name. I don't know why it's called an industrial patent, you know? You should have had it in your name. So I'm curious, did you sign a non-disclosure agreement? I do want to know that. What kind of like
The patents are in my name. I have a separate company to promote the patent. In fact, the patent was selected by IIM Ahmedabad, the top B school in India for incubation. And when it was on IIM Ahmedabad side, I was interviewed by Ernst & Young from London. They interviewed like 10,000 companies in the world and selected 100 companies for Global Partnership Program of UK. I was selected. I was invited by UK government in 2008 to set up a similar company in London. But the timing was wrong. It was the Lehman Brothers thing was happening and the economy was not good. Also, parallelly, I was already doing a global consulting work for ExxonMobil from 2007 to 14. So that did not materialize, but I was invited by UK government and I was welcomed. They showed me BBC's footage for 16 mm negatives, news footage. They wanted me to help them in restoring it.
So what is a good-looking film?
Good-looking.
Good-looking film are the demo films by Kodak and Fujifilm.
No, in all the years that you were working at Film Center and Film Lab, which film do you remember as the most striking in terms of
I will tell
color?
you, the films you remember because of the content and the story, not because of the color.
No, we don't agree.
Definitely. So it's very difficult to say any particular film, but then the technologies kept on changing from year to year, and there was definitely, but as far as sound is concerned, definitely I can take name of Sholay. When I saw the Sholay print in Minerva, that experience, those days, I mean, you cannot match with any other experience. And also, as far as the prints are concerned, like Hollywood IMAX prints are one of the best. I mean, for any standard, IMAX is definitely a better standard than even 35 technically.
Oh, I would want to one point, Ujwalji. Sorry, you talk about the prints and so on, but a lot of producers, especially in the 70s and 80s, and even up to some time into the 90s, they would complain about projection, and the projectors and the lenses were so poor quality that the color and it just wouldn't be there. And how did you feel about this, that the print would leave your lab in pristine condition and then it looked pretty damn mediocre in the cinema?
Yeah, that problem does exist. It's mainly because it may not be intentionally, but the thing is the projector operators are not properly trained how to, and in earlier days there was a carbon arc lamp. So in some cases, to save the energy and to save the carbon, they put the illumination to lesser levels than the required, then the print quality suffered. But after digital has come in, we have a different problem. The thing is, in film, the colors were locked in the lab. We cannot change it at the projection level. But in digital, only you get a DCP from a post-production house. And the colors depend on the calibration of that particular projector. So my role is different role I am already playing from SMPT, Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineer, which promotes the standards. They promoted standards for films, and now we are promoting standards for digital also. So we have made a standard film called DPRO, Digital Projection Verifier, so which we project and check it with meters to see that the digital projectors are calibrated properly or not. And that I have been doing for the Goa Film Festival for last 15 consecutive years, and we have been able to match the quality because we get films from different part of the world for that. And that should be used anywhere. I mean, it can be used anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
In fact, a simple example, when I'm flying in a plane, on a small monitor, we are watching the instructions, initial instructions, safety instruction. The colors vary. Even though the source is same, the monitors are same, still it varies slightly. So you need a color calibration for every digital display, which is a part of the display, and SMPT definitely helps in doing color calibrations.
And a question over here.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I actually had two small questions. The first one was you spoke about how color grading was done by people purely while looking at it.
Yeah.
Wondering, like, it sounds like a very straining activity in eyesight and whether people are losing their eyesight gradually over it. And I wondered if you could speak a bit more about people in that position and what was the length of careers that they had and for how long could they potentially continue to do something like this? And sorry, just the second question I had was slightly left field question, but you spoke about sort of questions of air conditioning, you spoke about labs being set up, and I wonder what kind of coordination was required with sort of architects of buildings or even people setting up air conditioning, engineers kind of designing how ventilation worked in these spaces, because I know you spoke a lot about the technology around film processing and color correction, but some of these sort of parallel things which you also have to work with in setting up a film lab in a building which is a film lab.
So first about the color graders, color consultant, they were really naturally gifted with that thing. It's not easy for everybody to understand exact minor variations in color. So it's because of their experience, and then they had certain cinematographer wanted to work with certain color consultants also because their tuning was good. So as far as I remember, we had 3 color consultants doing that thing, Mr. Gupte, Mr. Suresh Kamath, and Mr. Bashir. So even you'll see their names in the credits, and they have done a wonderful job. Before this thing came, the additive color correction with light wall. Even there also you have to keep on changing. But it was technically supported. But when you check only with eyes and keep changing the color, that was one of the toughest job. In fact, when the government started giving national award for films, the film, that time, the best cinematography award during the film lab was also shared with the lab. Because it's a combined effort between a cinematographer and a lab to give that result. So if you see, the labs are also included in that award.
Oh, good.
And clearly Van der Overa was
Yeah.
one of the best color
Yeah.
graders because his name is everywhere.
And as far as the storage conditions are concerned, there are certain norms. Definitely Kodak was the pioneer, so they have set up vaults. Protec Vault was one of the biggest vault Kodak has set up in Burbank. And we tried to follow the condition, but these lab buildings were never made for preserving for long term, because it's supposed to be a short term preservation there. If it is a long term preservation, it has to go to archive somewhere. Short term, till the prints are made or till the next order comes, that preservation can be done by the lab. And labs are situated in the most costly area in the city, so they cannot afford to have more space only for storage. The storage has to shift to some other place, other location.
Thank you very much. This is a question about the infrastructure of film labs and the kind of knowledge that's transmitted across between these kind of networks. And I'm interested in the digital turn and the kind of, with the proliferation of digital technology, how we've seen this kind of infrastructure of labs, of which you were an integral part, diminishing and dwindling. And we see the turn to that kind of knowledge and that transmission of knowledge moving towards small-scale, artist-run film labs, where this artisanal knowledge continues to be passed and proliferated and remains vivid and alive. And I wondered what your thoughts are on this kind of alternative form of transmission and the ways that these artisanal forms of knowledge continue to transmit globally.
See, we can record certain things in the form of books or this to keep that knowledge available for the next generation. But from SMPT, we already started webinars for the young students and young generation. So that is the current way of transferring knowledge. So we involve experts from the industry around the world. And there are webinars conducted. We have so many conferences happening. There are special conferences for archivists. There are two big organizations, FIAF, which is the International Archives, Federation of International Archives, and it is for archives only. And there is an individual, another organization, AMIA, Association of Moving Images Archivists, where even individuals can become a member, and they are imparting this knowledge about preserving, and even they are offering jobs for people who are trained. So I'm a member of both, and you should go to their websites and get some more information. Also, SMPT is also giving information. In fact, SMPT has given membership free to the first year students, and for the next 2 years, it depends on your course, it is nominal membership. Also, that can be sponsored from some other company. So that for students, we want to impart this knowledge, whatever is available through all these organizations. Even the academy has started Gold Mentorship Program. They have every year now 150 students as part of that. I have acted as a mentor for 3 years, and we have been training the young generation on these technologies. So this all is, it's a big effort required worldwide, and I think the universities can do it much better than anybody else because they are connected with the young generation.
Thank you so much. Maybe I'll follow up on that. It's kind of a two-part question, but I'm curious about, with the Film Center, specifically what its relationships were to those institutions of preservation, AMIA, SIMT, and so forth. Like how, beginning from when you started in the 1980s, were they actively involved in those organizations, or as an industrial lab, was it separate? And then I have a question about printing older negs. Like, was the Film Center routinely reprinting material? Like, kind of thinking about when you began in the 1980s, like from the 1970s and earlier, and how were you all dealing, were you dealing with, Kodak fade, the magenta fade, and what kind of work was being done in the lab at that level of coming to terms with the fading of the negs that was happening?
So, as far as the labs are concerned, many labs, they had their smaller divisions for restoration. More than restoration, most of the labs had a different technology. It was called liquid printing. A liquid printing is when you use a negative, and if there are scratches on the base, that get filled with the liquid, and the refractive index of the base and the liquid is same. So the scratches are not seen in the print. So that was the technology used by the labs to make new prints from old negatives. And even now at this National Film Heritage Mission, we are using a liquid scanner for old negatives where there are more scratches. So the technology, some of the lab technologies are already being used in the restoration process by many people. But since now electronics has stepped in and a lot of softwares are doing the same job what was done mechanically or chemically, so and AI is coming up, so I think AI will take over this direction to a different way, and it will make things much cheaper and faster. But labs were involved. I was personally involved in restoring Garm Hawa. At Film Lab, we had a restorations division even before I joined National Film Heritage Mission. So I've presented those footages at AMIA conferences, at FIAF earlier. So already we have done certain efforts. In fact, I have done restoration of Garm Hawa, and the sound was converted from mono to 5.1 stereo at Chase Deluxe in Burbank, which is one of the best sound restoration facility.
Yeah, we've got about a few minutes left if you want to round off.
If someone else has a question. No, I was just going to say that I also
I will be available in case you have any questions. I can talk.
I was told by Ujwal that even when the film prints were released, when they went to small towns, it was a mono track. But for the cities, they had the stereophonic track.
It depends
so we have to recognize the hierarchies that were
the
at
projection facility. If there is no projection facility available, in fact, some of the theaters, they never had a screen. They had a wall painted with white. So what technologies you can use?
So I think we've got one last question.
It's just taking up from Ranjani's point. I wanted to know how the prints are transported to these small towns, and also a little bit about the projectors and the hierarchy, because also that makes a huge difference in the way you receive the film. So I would be curious about that.
That's a very
So the prints are transported in a metal box, and it was weighing around 30 to 35 kg.
How did it
No,
travel?
it depends on where. If there are airports available, we used to send it by air. Otherwise, railways was the main source of transportation in India those days. And at the end, from the railway station, people used to go it on cycle to take it to the theatre.
But that's the thing, it's all this heat, all this kind of, and it lies very often somewhere for 2 days or 4 days with that kind of.
In fact, there is an interesting thing which a collection we got from railways is that after the release, if there is a release of 40 prints, the prints were abandoned by the distributor. And they used to put it on a fake address, book it on the railway. So it used to go to the railway godown, and National Film Archive has collected all these prints lying at the railways, and that collection also will give us some good quality prints which were not available earlier.
And some have got converted into glass bangles, no?
Yeah.
Majority of it. I mean, the ladies are responsible for it. The ladies are responsible for it because the nitrate is converted into nail paint, and the acetate was converted into bangles.
I think that's a great note to end on. Please join me in thanking Ujwal.